Welcome to Your Condo Connection, the CCI video series designed to assist condominium purchasers, owners, and boards. We hope that you'll continue to follow our series and listen to the experiences shared by our multitude of expert guests. In this session, we're going to take a look at something that's been a little more contentious lately, and I think something that applies right across the country. And that has to do with tying in the quality of management and life in a building to the cost per square foot. And we have two very special guests to help us get through this sometimes misunderstood topic. Today we're joined by Mario Deo from the firm of Fine and Deo, a local condominium law firm. Mario, thank you for coming. Mario, you're also the current sitting president on the board of directors for CCI Toronto.
Yes.
We're also joined by John Warren. John, thank you for coming today. John is an auditor with the firm of Adams and Miles, and you're a past president and director of CCI Toronto.
Yes.
Thank you for coming today and sharing your insight on this rather contentious subject. So let's get right into it. John, I'd like to start with you. Recently, a local Toronto condominium director went public and stated that low per square foot costs for common element fees indicated a well-run condominium. It hit every paper, it hit the radio and television for a while. I believe he was quoted as having fees in the range of roughly 30 cents per square foot, while he said the norm seems to be in the range of 50 to 75 cents per square foot. Is he right?
Well, cents per square foot's a misunderstood calculation, and it really doesn't have anything to do with the quality of operations or life in a condominium. All it does is take the total costs of operating the building, divide them by the total square foot, and that's your number. It doesn't tell you whether any of those costs are well spent, poorly spent, or somewhere in the middle. So for instance, if you have two buildings and one spends more than the other for security or cleaning, and they're otherwise equal, the one who spends more will have higher cents per square foot. That doesn't mean that the one who spends less is well maintained or poorly operated, nor the other. It's just a fact of one building has chosen to pay more for a different service than the first building. There are a number of things that affect it that have nothing to do with quality of life. The first is probably the size of the units. So if you have two buildings that are otherwise comparable, and one has an average suite size of 1,000 square feet, and the other it will have less cost per square foot than a building that's otherwise comparable, as I said, that has suites at 750 square feet, because you're just dividing by a different number. Same thing with number of units. If you have a building with 200 units, it pays less per square foot for a lot of costs than a building with 150 units. The problem with cents per square foot, just as a calculation, is that it tends to promote a race to the bottom. By that I mean, if everything is evaluated on the lowest possible cost divided by the total square footage, you tend to then see pressure on the boards to reduce costs, and that's not indicative of operations in a building.
So it sounds like there's a balance between the level of service you want and what that costs you. And once you find that level of service, it's then a balancing act and has actually nothing to do with per square foot.
Nothing at all.
Well, Mario, let me turn to you. The director stated that if funds were required, then special assessments could be levied, those one-time payments to catch up, whether it's $500 or $5,000. What does the Act and reasonably prudent behavior say about this approach?
That's an interesting question. And the numbers in this particular case, as quoted, were 44 cents a foot reduced to 31 cents a foot. The average in Toronto was quoted as being 59 cents a square foot. And I agree with John, it's just a number. But in this particular case, the condo is in a great spot, but it doesn't have any significant amenities or common areas or common services. That's the unique thing about the particular condo in question. And the very significant quote in the article was, the philosophy, the financial philosophy of that particular condominium corporation was that it's okay to once in a while have a special assessment for unexpected costs. Okay, well, let's think about that for a second. If you have unexpected costs and you're going to special assess for them, then that should be in the status certificate. The status certificate should say that this condominium, if it has unexpected costs, will special assess for those costs. Well, the market is going to judge that very harshly. That's the first thing. The second thing is directors have to act as reasonably prudent people would act in that circumstance. And I want to ask you a question. Would a reasonably prudent person not budget for unexpected costs?
Good question.
I think the Condominium Act, the whole purposes behind it, and the practices being used by most directors in condominiums say that the standard is you must budget for unexpected costs. And if someone were my client asking me that, I would say, if you're not budgeting for unexpected costs, you're incurring liability. Because what if a big cost comes along and you say, well, that was an unexpected big cost? Well, the first thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to raise their hand and say, in a formal legal way, you didn't do the right thing because you didn't budget for that cost. You didn't even try to.
Good point. John, you've been an auditor for many years, and you've done more audits than certainly I can count. Is that reasonable to say that you should be budgeting for the unexpected?
Well, as a practical matter in condominiums, there aren't all that many unexpected costs. So what would be an unexpected cost that would not be a major repair and replacement? Major repair and replacement's governed by the reserve fund. You have reserve fund studies. You must follow them. Well, you should follow them. And so it's kind of hard to conceive of a really significant unexpected cost for which funds would not be available. So what you end up with is they budget so tightly that operations in general run at a deficit, and then they special assess to cover those deficits. That is not prudent financial management. You should budget for all your costs, and as Mario says, you should have a small contingency in there that if you don't use it, it builds up over the years, and then if, for instance, we have a really harsh winter and your utility costs are 30 or 40% over budget, you've got this contingency fund that's built up available to pay for it. This condominium is saying, well, if that happens, we'll special assess. Not prudent financial management.
It sounds like, gentlemen, what this particular catalyst for this discussion is saying is we're going to artificially deflate our budget to make us look good, and we'll just take the money as we need it through special lump sum payments.
Yeah. That seems to be
Fair
it.
enough.
And just as a comment on the 31 cents, the average is 59 cents. As I said, cents per square foot's not a great measure of anything. However, if your building is half what the average is, you better have, as Mario says, very few amenities. Otherwise, something, or you've shorted your reserve fund, or you're budgeting very, very low, and they apparently are, with the idea of special assessing when these unexpected but predictable cost overruns happen. Wouldn't be my choice of a place to live, and I agree with Mario. If that was put in the status certificate, they'd be judged pretty harshly, I believe.
Mario, I could imagine, when we start to talk about status certificates, now we're going from financial into the law with full disclosure. So I'm going to leave you with the last few comments. Anything you'd like to add about the approach of special assessment?
Yes. First of all, why would a director incur that risk of openly saying we're going to special assess and then crossing your fingers and hoping it's not big? Because once all of the shortfalls accumulate, then you've got a big special assessment. And that 31 cents a foot is going to go right back to where it was, which was 44 cents. Went from 44 to 31. I read the article. So as my last word, I'll say this. If the same condo is identical right next door, and one has lower fees than the other, the one with lower fees is going to sell for more. But the world is not that way with common expenses. And if a condominium is tightly run, let's say cheaply run, that condominium is going to show it over time and will lose market share or market value. Another condominium that's run properly will have the proper market value over time. So there's two things that judge properly run common expenses, properly run condominiums, and those two things are time and market value. And the only thing that really matters is proper common expenses, not cheap common expenses.
Good points from both of you. So it sounds like if you budget and you're careful about budgeting for those unexpected, as you say, there's not too many in a condo environment, then you don't have anything you need to put in your reserve fund. And potentially, if you do run a surplus, there are ways to deal with that in the future. The truth is here is that expenses are what they are. Don't try and pretend they're something else. Thank you so much for your insight, gentlemen. It was great having you here today. We really appreciate the insight. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a contentious issue, not just in Toronto, but right across the country. And I hope that with the help of our guests today, that this has helped clear it up just a little bit for you. Until next time, I'm Murray Johnson, and this has been your Condo Connection.